Hey there, Taurus. Congratulations, you're pregnant. This is your March bonus reading. We're going to talk about the eclipse that's happening on March 3rd. That's going to be the focus for this reading. You have this stars card. It says a long journey brings rewards. You have this serpent card. It says a sly, subtle approach is needed. So this eclipse is happening in your 5th house. And I think that any ideas that you are pregnant with are or could be very successful for you at this time, Taurus. So, I would be working on, kind of like nurturing something, as always, like I've said to you, your past 10 readings, because that's going to lead to the most success in your life, for sure. Especially with this eclipse, especially being in a fellow Earth sign, and, you're going to benefit from it. It is a pretty positive eclipse. Like, I think it's a little bit better than the last one that we had, and, I think it's a little bit easier, so that's nice. I also think it's, pretty well aspected for you as well. So you have that card. It says a long journey brings reward, and you have the 7 of Wands, the Lovers, and the Queen of Swords. The first row is going to represent what is out of alignment in your life, or what you could be bringing into alignment, really. This Virgo eclipse, really good time for, bringing something into alignment. The 7 of Wands can be a little bit of a stubborn energy sometimes, which you're a Taurus, so, maybe you could be a little bit stubborn at times. I really don't think this is necessarily a bad thing for Taurus. Like, again, sometimes I think it's good. Sometimes it can be good for you, Taurus, to be stubborn. Sometimes it can be good if you're, sticking to something and not giving up, and then that makes you successful, right? It's not always a bad thing to be stubborn. This is a card of conviction. It says when you know that something is for you, then, if you believe something so deeply that you make it happen, that can sometimes be a good thing. What I would say is we go down here to the 7 of Swords. To me, 2 7s in a reading represents internal fears that don't exist. And then we go to the Chariot, which is like a victory or a success. So it's like good, but at the same time, the 7 of Swords says there might be a better way to do whatever it is that you're doing. So I would just still stay flexible with the 7 of Wands. You have the Lovers. It's an amazing time for love for you, Taurus, for sure. Again, this is happening in your 5th house for most of you. Even if it's not, it's going to affect you all pretty much the same. So 5th house is the house of romance, play, self-expression, creativity, hobbies, interests, things like that. So everything I just listed, is going to be good for you to focus on for like the next 6 months. Eclipses last for like 6 months. And so, all those things are good, but, it definitely could be a very romantic time for those of you that want love. You're going to have to put yourself out there. We have the Sun here. The Sun is a very good card, but, you also have the Hermit. So the Hermit is like trying to avoid attention. The Sun, with the Magician, is pointing to the Sun. The Sun says we have to step into the light. So if you want attention, yeah, you're going to have to, meet a person like in public, believe it or not, or you're going to have to put yourself out there in some way. But like I said, I think it's an awesome time for love for you, Taurus. You have the Queen of Swords. A lot of clarity this month. I said it in the March monthly readings, I think, that pretty much everybody has been getting a lot of clarity recently. Some retrogrades bring us a lot of clarity. They bring us a lot of answers from the past. Eclipses can sometimes... sometimes I feel like they're like a little bit karmic, not like really karma necessarily, but more like fated information, things that maybe align us better with our journey or, get us onto our path. And that's kind of what I feel with the Queen of Swords. She only has clouds halfway up her body, and she's seeing clearly for the first time. So a lot of you could be seeing the future or, kind of like understanding the path that you're on a deeper level with the Queen of Swords. And I feel like this could just be answers or, something along those lines. Again, pretty much everyone in these readings has had clarity, and it doesn't really surprise me. Virgo energy loves being clear. And so the more clear we are on what we're doing, the better. And so I like this first row. It's kind of funny because, again, I always say I label these rows, like this first row is what you're out of alignment with, but I don't like force them to fit. And so I don't really think it's talking about alignment other than clarity. You have the Hangman with the 7 of Wands. The Hangman, he is about enlightenment. So again, it's almost as if you are in alignment. He has put himself on pause. I do think you've been on pause for a while. I do think a lot of you have maybe been stuck on something for a while. And again, this isn't like a bad thing. Sometimes I think we just like get excited by an idea in life, and because we're excited, like we get stuck on it a little bit and we don't see like other opportunities that exist. And I kind of feel like you're opening back up. So I feel pretty good about that, Hangman. With the lovers, you have the King of Swords. Yeah, it could be someone older than you. I am almost 1,000,000% sure that like for the past few months, you've been getting like an older person or some sort of age difference going on in the situation. So, and you have the Hermit as well. So, the Hermit is like knowledge and wisdom as well as the King of Swords. So you could be attracting someone with a lot of knowledge and wisdom, or just like a lot of life experience. Sometimes I feel like the King of Swords might be the same age, or could even be a little bit younger, but maybe they come off as if they're older. It's really just a card of maturity. So if you're looking for love, sure. Could also be an air sign. With the King of Swords, and so if you're looking for love, there you go. It's kind of funny that you have the Queen of Swords. I do not really like these two as divine counterparts, although it can work. These two just don't see eye to eye, and sometimes it can cause some issues, I think, with the King and Queen of Swords. It can also be too cerebral. It can be a little bit too mental, and I think that this is also an issue because we just had Neptune and Pisces. Again, the problem with like dating during Neptune and Pisces is if something is only in your head. And so in relationships, for example, it's like you can get into a relationship in Neptune and Pisces that like, it's like, yeah, like maybe you spend time with the person and all this other stuff, but there can be like a fantasy element where it just never becomes real. And so now that you have this, the problem is we have the fantasy right here with the 10 of Cups, right? So if you've been dealing with a person, this could be saying that it's time to either make it real or not. And the choice is yours. This is not, like, I don't feel this is good or bad. I feel like this is saying now is just a time when you can decide whether it becomes real or not. If you're not with a person, then I would make sure that there is some reality to the connection, right? With the Queen of Swords, you cannot make it up. Like I said, 7 of Cups. 7 of Cups is like too much thinking. It's in the clouds. These 7 cups exist above this person's head, more or less. He's looking at all the good things and bad things that could happen. So this is definitely asking you to make the commitment. I would also say whether you want love or not doesn't really matter. Because, like I said, you're pregnant here, Taurus, at the beginning of your reading. But I think it's about making the commitment. I feel like some of you could be working on something that maybe it takes 9 months. Maybe it, and if you have a baby, it's like obviously babies can't do anything; they're useless, right? So you have to take care of them for a certain amount of time. And so I feel that for you, especially with this energy in Aries as well, especially Saturn, it can make us like need to commit to something. Like a project, a business, a job, like whatever it is you're doing in life. And it can make us, like, it asks us to commit to something that is going to take time to build. And so I feel a lot of you could be being asked to almost like, it's like something in your life is like a baby, or it's like you have to get pregnant first. There's going to be a gestation period of time, and then after it's born, there's going to be like a time where you have to raise it and take care of it, and give it, feed it and nurture it and all that other stuff, right? And I think it's going to be totally worth it because you have this card. It says a long journey brings rewards. Next, we're going to look at what no longer fits in your life. You have this helping hand card. It says the universe is helping you find something that you need that will lead to the next right step. You have this divine intelligence. It says to connect with your higher self, you must first create space to listen. Hermit. Plus, we also are in a Mercury retrograde for sure. So, during the retrograde, it's a great time to listen, great time to meditate, great time to be into hermit mode as well. I think dedicated hermit mode would be good for you right now here, Taurus, because again, if you want like I do think with the 5th house being activated with this eclipse, sometimes it asks us to like be more social and get out there and get out of the house and all that other stuff. So I think you're going to have to balance the two things, like alone, you're going to need dedicated alone time, and you're going to need maybe dedicated social time, right? And but I do think that dedicated alone time is going to be important with that divine intelligence card. So it might be a good time for you to have some sort of routine, or to like develop a process, like I don't know, journaling every single night, or meditating every night, or whatever time you want to do it, right? That's what I mean by dedicated, where there's like no distraction. You're just focused on something for a certain period of time, and that could be where you get a lot of answers this month. So I would be making sure you do that. You have the Seven of Swords. I've said it before, that I think the Seven of Swords is going to come up about 6 billion times between now and 2033. Everybody gets it because Uranus and Gemini. Even though it's not there till next month, it doesn't matter. I think we're just going to, from here on out, it's going to keep showing up, because this is what Uranus and Gemini wants us to do. It wants us to find a better way of doing things. He is stealing those swords from this army in the background so he doesn't have to go to war. And he's doing something in a better way. And it just basically says there are probably better ways to do everything. We talk about this like every single reading, Taurus, for you. And I would just something that I would think about. The other thing about the Seven of Swords is all that Aries energy, I think, is very serious. He has these polka dots on his cloak. And polka dots in the tarot want us to be more playful. They want us to have more fun, do more things to enjoy life. It's going to be critically important for you because, again, this eclipse is happening in your 5th house. And so, that is romance, play, creation, self-expression, creativity, hobbies, interests. Those things are going to be more valuable to you. Again, as a person, many years ago, I always tell a story. I had a big business failure, and I got super serious after that for like 4.5 years. And I have never been so stuck in my life. So the reason I talk about it is because I don't want people to have to go through what I went through. So that's why I share my experience, right? But that whole entire time, I was just trying to force things to work. I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't spend time with friends. I wouldn't do anything. And I was just stuck, plain and simple, right? And that is what the Seven of Swords tries to get us to realize, is that if you're just trying to focus on a problem, it's like all you're doing is you're just zoomed in to that problem, and you're just attaching yourself to it. When you go have fun, when you go play, when you go spend time with friends, that's when I started doing that. That's what solved my problem, basically, is when I did that, I got out of my head. I stopped thinking about my problems. And so then the universe can bring you an answer. And I feel like that is what the Seven of Swords is saying. You have the Ten of Cups, which I feel pretty good about. I mean, Ten of Cups is like fortune after difficulty, happy home, happy family. You do have very good cards here. Again, these readings have been very positive, much more positive than the last eclipse that we had in Aquarius, for sure. And so I think that there could be a lot of happiness coming in for you. Like I said, childlike energy. I think we said this in your monthly reading, being more playful. All that other stuff is going to be extra beneficial for you with the Ten of Cups, and it's just going to lead to a lot more joy in your life. And you have the Sun, and so the Sun really wants us to focus on love, joy, happiness, peace, good energy, things like that. With the Hermit, you have the Tower. I think this is needing to make a choice. The Hermit, he has a choice. He can stay stuck at the top of his mountain that he's standing on top of, or he can come down into the world and he can shine his inner light. The Tower is about changing reality. These people have been ignoring reality. The Hermit, he might be ignoring reality at the top of that mountain. And so he needs to come, he's trying to protect himself from reality, which is something that we can't ever really do in the first place. So, it's kind of about escaping, coming down to reality. With the Seven of Swords, you have the Ten of Cups again, which is great. Like I said, more fun, more joy, more peace, more good energy, fortune after difficulty. With the Ten of Cups, you have the Two of Swords. Yeah, again, third place solutions coming over here. Again, I do think you're going to keep getting this type of energy since Uranus is going into your 2nd house. And again, we've talked about it before. I do think a lot of your, a lot of the things you're trying to correct are probably have to do with work, business, how you make money, value, things like that. I think of Taurus as really, obviously you are the 2nd house technically. If we just look at a chart, you are house number 2. And so you like 2nd house energy. And I also think that, Taurus, of course, loves value, loves the nicer things in life, all that, right? And so she's kind of stuck in the old life here where she is. And she thinks she only has 2 choices. But she has a third option over here. I always say this is my card of third place solutions. And I feel that that is like the answer to something that you've been trying to do for a long time, Taurus, is like a third place solution or doing things in a different way. Next, we are going to look at what is coming in to replace anything that you're releasing. You have this ancient and future energies. You have this Roadrunner. It says trust and knowledge. I think you're like the second person to have this Roadrunner card. So, which is interesting. I shuffle all these decks in between, these Oracle decks. And so it's not very common, though, that I get a repeat in the readings. But you could be like charging forward. And we see a lot of knowledge and wisdom here with the King of Swords and the Hermit. So you could be using it. You also have that ancient, what did that card say? It said ancient and future energies on it. It's almost like that's what Taurus needs to do is, take your old ideas and, upgrade them for the time that we're in, which I've said to you a billion times this year, last year, a bunch of times. I've said to you before, it's like you're taking an old idea and you're upgrading it for the time that we're in. It's like, I think the best example I can always come up with for you is like radio, and I've said this to you before. It's like, if you wanted to be on the radio, it's like no one really listens to the radio anymore, but you could start a podcast, which is basically the same thing. It's just upgraded, right? And so I think that a lot of you Taurus people, you could be doing that, could be with a hobby as well. Again, if there was ever a time where you could like turn a hobby into a business, it would probably be right now, especially, having this eclipse and then in April, having Uranus enter into your second house. It's like anything that you value or anything that could bring more value into your life, that is like personal, that you love to do, would be very good. You have the Ace of Wands, the Magician, and the Chariot. The Ace of Wands, like out with the old, in with the new. And so this castle in the background is crumbling, probably like the old way of doing things. The Ace of Wands is the new inspired direction. So it's like time to get inspired here, Taurus. And it's time to, the other thing that's popping into my head here is that, it's time to do what works. I don't really know how to, how to explain this, but it's just, after the past few years, I've been working with a lot of YouTubers, and a lot of the times, it's like I'll work with someone, and it's like they think they're doing what works, but they're like really not, And so sometimes I think we just need a person, and again, you don't have to like pay money for this, right? You can, there might just be a person in your life who knows like what you're working on, and they might be able to say like, hey, you're doing something that is like old, or you're doing something that doesn't work anymore, and this other idea works better. So you don't have to like, take it as gospel or anything, but I do think getting feedback, it's popping into my head with the Ace of Wands that, external feedback or, really focusing on what is working could be important. You have the Magician. The Magician is manifestation, of course, and reinvention. Whenever we have, to me, those first three houses in astrology, 1, 2, and 3, are personal houses. And so, again, we have a lot of energy moving into those houses, even over the next several years. Again, you're going to have in 2028 or whatever, Saturn is going to move into your sign. There's like a lot of things going on. So, and, plus Uranus moving into your second now. All this personal energy could have you, even though it's not like happening this second, some of it, I feel a lot of it is going to be triggering a lot of personal change in your life. And so the Magician, we have to act as if we already are the thing that we want to be. And that is what I would do with the Magician. And then we just have to step into the light. So I think a lot of you could be really stepping into the light here. The other thing that we could kind of talk about here, Taurus, is that 11th house energy for you, because, there are, or I should say, there were a lot of planets in that like 11th house, and having this eclipse in your 5th can also trigger the 11th, and so the 11th is kind of like stepping into the light. The 11th is sometimes like fame. The 11th house is your like social standing and how you stand out, which I think all that could be getting hit as well. You have the Chariot, which is like a victory or a big success coming in for you here. Again, the Chariot wants you to set yourself apart. He's leaving this city behind him behind. And so I wouldn't play it too safe and, do what everybody else is doing. I think it's a good time, in work and business, whatever, to do things your own way. With the Ace of Wands, you have the Four of Swords. Yeah, like, again, balancing work and play, or, balancing that your social energy with your dedicated rest energy. And maybe that's what's really important, is that it would be a really good time to have, like, really good, sleep hygiene, for example. Like, don't look at screens, before you go to bed. All those rules that they have. Don't drink coffee at, 6 o'clock at night, right? Stuff like that. It's like, I feel like it's almost like this, the Hermit, is saying that if you have that, like, dedicated rest time where you really work on making sure you're actually getting rest, you're going to have a lot more energy, like, for not just this month, but like the next 6 months after the eclipse. If you don't, then you might burn out. So, I would make sure you're watching that stuff. With the Magician here, you have the Five of Wands. Yeah, Five of Wands is conflict or competition, but your answer is right here. Your answer is the Chariot. Five of Wands is pretty easy right now because we have Neptune and Aries. As I've said a million times, I think with Neptune and Aries, everybody is going to try to be the same. And so all we have to do is be a little bit different wherever we're trying to stand out, and we will win. With the Chariot, you have the Nine of Swords. Nine of Swords can be like a never-ending nightmare. You could be, this could be good, because you could be, with the Chariot, setting yourself apart from, like, Groundhog's Day. Nine of Swords is my Groundhog's Day card. It is just things being the same every single day, over and over and over again. And one of the simple solutions to the Nine of Swords is to kind of, like, shift your routine, or change up your routine, or add something to your routine that could break you out of that energy. And with the Chariot, you probably are. Next, we are going to look at your long-term outcome from this eclipse. You have this never-ending story card and this building blocks card. So again, you could be ending that never-ending story of Groundhog's Day. The building blocks, you are definitely building something at this time. It's an excellent time for you, Taurus, to build whatever it is that you want to build, really. You have the Wheel of Fortune, the Page of Swords, and the Sun. The Wheel of Fortune is a change in your fortunes. The Wheel of Fortune wants us to take control of the wheel and the direction that the wheel is spinning. So we need to make sure that we're, doubling down on the good stuff and facing the challenges right away. What's popping into my head for you, Taurus, is I think it would be good for you to, like, look at progress that you've made over the last, like, 3 years, and to look at the places where things have been the same for the past 3 years or so. And I feel if you do that, then you can either eliminate those things that are just the same and not changing, or you can, do something to change wherever you're not getting a better result, or where something is not growing. Like I said, you have to look at this as like a pregnancy reading, where you are pregnant with an idea, or you're pregnant with something you want to work on or create, right? And you have to think about, like, how can I get the most out of the things I'm nurturing? And that's what I would focus on. You have the Page of Swords. Page of Swords is a card of curiosity. Page of Swords usually comes up a lot during Mercury retrograde, because retrogrades are good for getting to the bottom of anything that you don't know. And so I think, doing research and getting answers would be good. You have the Sun, best card in the deck. So Sun is like joy, happiness, good energy, the sun shining on you, especially in this last row. So I think it's time for you to, like, show off for sure. With the Wheel of Fortune, you have the Ten of Swords, which again is probably pretty good. Ten of Swords says something is dead, done, over with. It is a blessing in disguise. He's making a symbol right here with his hand that represents a blessing. So, a lot of you could be, like, ending a cycle finally, or ending something that has been a cycle, or going round and round and finally moving forward. With the Page of Swords, you have the Ace of Wands again, which is amazing. Again, if something is inspiring you or something is getting you excited, Page of Swords wants you to do your research and wants you to look into it. And so, getting to the bottom of any new ideas would be good. With the Sun, you have the Emperor here. You could be attracting an Emperor, of course. And again, this is definitely a good time for love for you, Taurus. But this could also be you taking control of something, like an opportunity. The Emperor, he takes control of opportunities that come his way. You have this heart card. It says love, deep affection, and caring. Like I said, it's an amazing. It doesn't surprise me. You definitely have like the best month for love, probably. Eclipses can bring in faded connections. So even if it doesn't happen this month, right? Again, you have like 6 months of this energy. So definitely could be a really good time for love. Can't make this one up here, Taurus. It says dog close up, pleasure with close friends. Like I said, I think social time is going to be equally as important as rest time. And so maybe you have to like balance those two things out. Again, if you go out for 5 hours with friends, it's like maybe you need to say to yourself like, okay, this week I need to get 5 extra hours of rest, right? Like maybe literally you should be balancing it out that way. And, I think it could just making sure there's balance is going to be good. You have this chain. It says chain of events that will affect your life. You are definitely one of the signs I think is like finally connecting the dots, based off of what you've been through or what you've experienced. So I get like just a connecting the dot type of energy here. You have this unicorn. It says use your intuition to make beneficial changes. Very intuitive time. So yeah, any downloads you're receiving for sure. And of course you have this love card. So like we already said, tons of love at this time if you want it. But this looks pretty good, Taurus. I like it. So thank you for being here. Make sure to leave a comment, and definitely enjoy your month.